Hey, Tony, you were just asking me a great question. We were talking about the pod, and you said, wait, last week you were the subject.
Yeah.
And yeah, I was. It was super fun. So I have this great friend who I've known for probably 20 years, and he and I have worked together. We went to business school together. We have in various random entrepreneurial endeavors together. And so I was like, wait a second, I want to talk about this topic, but I feel like this was one of the few things where I'm like, I may know more about this one thing than anyone we've talked to. But I don't want to just do a yapping podcast where it's just me. So I thought it would be more entertaining to bring Ben on. And I actually hoped he would join us today. He's going to pop in the guest chair in some future episodes. So yeah. So you, but this is not about me. Let's talk about you. You did something which I find both bold, brave, and insane, which is you went back to school mid-career and you are getting something I didn't know existed, which is the Doctor of Business Administration. So
Yes.
what's up? What is that? What was going through your head?
Yeah. So I'm a 20-year veteran in marketing. I've grown through the ranks from assistant all the way to CMO. I work for some companies that people have heard of, some big media companies and some not so big media companies. But what I discovered is that the world is shrinking, and I have personally been impacted many times. And so it got to the point where I'm like, is it me? Like, do I need to switch industries? Industries would not be forgiving. And so finally, I always had this thought of becoming a doctor, not a medical doctor, but potentially a PhD. And at this point in my career, I'm in my 40s. I'm looking at what my career options are. I have kids in elementary school. And I was like, I can't do a PhD. That's 5 to 7 years. I'll be in my 50s when I graduate. And that's just too long. There has to be a better way to do this because I have all this experience that I bring to the table. And so there's this newer kind of practitioner degree called a Doctor of Business Administration degree, DBA. And with this degree, they acknowledge that you're a practitioner, you have how many years of experience. And so they apply that experience to give you a real quick PhD type experience, but within a couple of years, because you already have a lot of business acumen and a lot of practitioner experience. And so I found these programs. There's only a few across the country and across the world, but I found these programs where it's like 3 years, you're in, you're out, you get your education and you walk away as a doctor. And I told my kids that for the first year, once I get that degree, I'm not your mother, I'm your doctor. But that said, it really helps you apply the best kind of qualitative and quantitative research to solve problems, real world problems that we see as a practitioner. So it's been really insightful and really interesting. Fun ride.
And so it's focused more different than an MBA. It's focused more on the research components of the why things are the way they are versus kind of the nuts and bolts of how business school curriculum believes a business should be run.
Yes. And so I received my master's in marketing. So I don't have a traditional MBA like yourself. But it's kind of like the black belt of business degrees. Like you can't get any higher than this. And it's really meant to understand how you could solve problems by breaking them down with theory, developing theory, and really getting at the root of what's going on. So it's really interesting. It's keeping my brain sharp.
And you're at Drexel. What year are you in your first year?
I'm in my second year, so I'm in my dissertation phase. Next month, I'll be, knock on wood, a doctoral candidate. I'll be defending my proposal for my dissertation. And then I have the rest of the year to write the paper and defend early next year. So it's quick. It's been 2 years.
Wow, that's awesome. Okay, so you are studying, so within the Doctor of Business Administration, the topic that interested you was one that's close to us, which is fractional executives.
Yes.
Why? What about fractional executives did you find interesting enough to spend 2 years of your life studying?
Yeah, it's crazy. So just as I've been at these inflection points with my career, and I'm a member of Chief, and there's this transitions group for people who are in between careers or entertaining other careers. And this concept of fractional leadership, fractional executive kept smacking me in the face. Like, oh, I'm a fractional, I'm a fractional. I'm like, what is this? Like, what are you? Who are you? What is this? And I discovered it maybe fall 2023. And I thought that could be something that's interesting to me, like a fractional CMO role. But I didn't know what this whole thing was about. And so as I started doing research, just as a fractional curious person, I discovered that there's a lot of articles and stuff out there in the practitioner journals, like the Wall Street Journal, Forbes, Fortune, Harvard Business Review, but there's really no empirical research. Does it work? How does it work? What is this? Is it sustainable? What's going on with this phenomenon? Why is there a phenomenon? And so as I brought this to my doctoral program, I was talking to my professors about it, and they're like, whoa, 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 what is this fractional thing? Academia has not heard of it. And it's mind-blowing because in the world of management, in the world of human resources and accounting, this is so applicable on so many levels. But yet I could only find 2 distinct studies that have been done on this, but not to the scale that I'm looking to encounter and endeavor.
So what, yeah, tell us about your research. What are you really, like, what pieces of this you're interested in the impact? But is it more on the, like, what do people do? How do they get into it? Like, what's the kind of nut you're trying to crack?
All of it, all of the above. So I recently completed a study with my professor and my co-author, Rajiv Nag, PhD. And as part of that, we did a qualitative study on the lived experience of fractionals. So what does it mean to be fractional? What does your day-to-day life include? As part of this research, I interviewed probably close to maybe 50 people, but 30 were included for the study analysis. And as part of that, I got a real great understanding of the journey that fractional people go on, how they come into the space, what it means to them, why they do the work. And it's really fascinating. And so we just recently submitted this 30-page paper, which I can't get into too many specifics because it's under review. But we just submitted it to the Academy of Management for the annual meeting in Copenhagen. Hopefully we'll get in, but we're also looking to submit it at another major academic journal. And the goal being that it gets academia really thinking about this. And so that then when Harvard Business Review and the Wall Street Journal, when they see that there's actual empirical research on this, they can then use it to drive more insights and hopefully really get some more awareness to this phenomenon.
Yep. So top line learnings from the study.
Yeah.
Why are people becoming fractionals in the first place? Because, there's some, I don't know, at least in my experience in conversations, like there's some very big positives to it, but there's some scary stuff there too. What are you learning?
Yeah, so there's a number of different reasons why people are doing it. On average, they tend to be 20 plus years of experience, very seasoned. A lot of fractionals come from big corporate companies, Fortune 500, big corporations, or smaller organizations, but with really big impactful roles. And what I'm finding is a lot of them might have had a recent layoff. And so they're at this point where they have all this experience and they're finding it hard to re-enter the marketplace because now they're kind of too aged out or too experienced or too expensive to be brought in as a C-suite. So there's one part where it's people who've been recently laid off, but then there's also this kind of, whether it's part of the Great Resignation, but just people are done with toxic culture and being in corporate places that they can't fully flex their muscle and make impact. And so people who have financial stability are electing to walk away from their corporate jobs to do something that's more on their terms, which speaks to another point is that this is a lot of fractionals. It's a lot of their third career stages. So they've done a lot of work earlier on to get to certain points. And now they're like, all right, these are my twilight years. And I really want to have agency in what I'm doing. And by agency, meaning that they want to prioritize themselves, their families, maybe their children are off at college. Maybe their children are adults. Maybe their children are still in elementary school. But the point being, and maybe as a side effect of the pandemic, that they are really prioritizing what's important to them, and having flexibility and be able to be present with their families is definitely huge, as well as also wanting to control their schedules. And I thought this was interesting. They also really want to be able to pick and choose who they work for.
Yes, this is huge.
And in a lot of cases, it's that they have opportunities to work for several companies. Fractionals do work in more than one company simultaneously, but they can pick and choose. They have that kind of cachet, that kind of expertise, where if they find after a few weeks of doing discovery and onboarding with a new client that is not working out for them, they will end the retainer and move on to another organization that is more in line with what they're looking to do, and it's a better fit for them.
Yeah. I'm going to pause here. Let's bust a couple myths, because you've come at this from a research perspective. I have been talking to these people for 6 years, right? So I'm coming at this from like a personal anecdotal perspective. I hear the exact same thing. So a couple myths. There is one myth about the financial risk of this, meaning you walk away from a W-2 job. Where's your next paycheck coming from? ... Here is what I find the situation is. If you are a person at the cusp of that third career stage, you have 20 to 30 years of experience, and you likely have at least 10 to 15 years of RSUs and equity from your employer that, if you worked in most businesses right now, is worth enough money for you to just walk away. You know, like one of our clients has had a very successful equity run over the last 15 years. And I'm telling you, director level people there probably have $10 million.
Wow.
Because they've been there for 25 to 30 years. And that gives people the permission to give themselves I think it gives them the permission to choose that agency, right? And so I just don't think mainstream media talks enough about, not enough, but they just ignore the fact that there's this whole class of white collar workers that are sitting on piles and piles of equity. So that's, I think, a huge thing. The idea of agency. That is my why. And so I think in your research, you've kind of started to break out the different types of who these people are and why they do it. I was on I had a conversation this morning with a former colleague from BCG. I will call him an old friend because he's not old, but he's kind of exploring some different, like, he's looking ahead a year to 3 years, and that is my third career stage. He's still at the peak of his second. And he was like, "Why do you do this?" And I was like, "Look, 99% of the time I say yes. I say yes to whatever my clients need. I am in service of them. I'll do a weekend, like whatever. I say yes. But you know what keeps me going? The fact that the 1% I could say no.
Yeah.
But I could.
Yeah.
It's
a game changer.
It is a huge mental game changer, because when I had a job, and I had great jobs, and I worked with people I enjoyed. But I always felt on Sunday nights like, what was this week going to hold? I have no control over it. Even though I could easily have walked away from that job in the same way.
Yeah.
Like, I never did. I said no and more stuff in that job than I say this job, but because I feel like I can.
Yep.
It gives me that little, like the trade-offs that I make from those RSUs that, frankly, like, I didn't think about 10 years ago. Might be nice to have some of them. But I think that 1% of the ability is well worth it.
You bring up a lot of great points, and there is such thing as the Sunday scaries, and I gotta go to my W-2 tomorrow, and what is that going to be like, and is my role going to be eliminated? Like, I know that they're trying to cut costs. Like, it's very jarring. And what I'm finding is with fractionals is that they're able to really pick and choose where they work for, because they have those opportunities where they've grinded early in their career and they have that savings, but they want to give back. There's also this part of this altruism of wanting to make impact and not be part of the machine and a cog in the wheel. They want to be able to use all this amazing knowledge that and expertise that they've acquired and try to find small and medium businesses that could really leverage it on their terms.
Yeah. I hear that from my consultant team. Like they each get very connected and to their clients. And some of them have like really great personal friendships with them. Others of them just have like really good professional relationships. Like I don't think they call themselves friends.
Yes.
But the commonality between all of them is that they really, really, really are invested in the success of that person.
Yes.
It's the person. It's not even the company or the client. They don't tell me, oh, I really care that, X client. It's like, I really care that Jane is able to do this thing. And I think it's a lot of reward for them.
Yes, there's definitely a mentoring and a coaching aspect of it, whether they're coaching and mentoring the CEO or the founder, or maybe it's junior people on the team that without bringing in a fractional level, the junior person's reporting to the CEO and founder. And so now they're like, wow, there's someone who can hear me and see me and actually give me the attention to help grow me. And so that's definitely an important role that fractionals make. And it's something that isn't necessarily line itemed on the retainer. Like, oh, I'm also going to include some coaching or some mentoring.
Yeah.
It's just like the added value you get for bringing in that talent with people who want to help other people genuinely. It's a very, very fascinating phenomenon that people are just so wanting to just help people.
Mm-hmm. I call it the power team.
Yeah.
And it's like
completely.
the ancillary benefit of working with someone, right? It's like, look, we're going to bring in this really seasoned person, have them work directly with your highest junior performer because they're going to accelerate the hell out of their growth and they're both going to love it and they're going to be happy. And it's like this magical thing that happens. That's great. Okay. Question for you. Do you think that moving to the client side, do you think clients recognize that? Like, how are you seeing trends in how they see the value of fractional executives?
Yeah. So there's a couple things going on in the market. There are fractional executives that are on their own and that are finding business through their network, mostly the network. That's the number one way that fractionals do land their engagements, their client engagements. However, there are also these companies that have whole groups of fractionals, these agencies, if you will. And these agencies, they may specialize in a certain fractional areas, such as in finance, a whole group of fractional CFOs, CIOs. I've met the gamut of all these different organizations that their goal is to have these experts readily available. And so what some of the challenges is that small to medium businesses, even larger enterprise, they don't know that this talent is out there, that this resource is out there. They might not have the budget for a C-suite role as a CMO, but they could afford a fraction of that cost and still get some of that expertise embedded. So what's going on is there's kind of this inflection point where a lot of these agencies are now working together and forming an alliance and trying to help drive more awareness to the market that this is out there. And so if anything, there tends to be this almost like a surplus of talent between you have all these agencies and then you have these individual people trying to cultivate their own businesses. And so now it's just really just driving the awareness that there are these humans out there that have done amazing work for amazing companies over hundreds of years, but people don't realize that they're out there. And so that's one of my goals, is to really help drive that awareness in the market.
Within that group, are you seeing anyone being successful? Like, what hooks are working? What hooks from those agencies? This is a selfish question. What from those agencies are working and making clients realize, like, oh, wait a second, this could be the solution to the problem? Because normally you'd say, like, okay, let me just tell you my problem. I find it really hard sometimes to articulate the problem we solve.
Okay.
Because in a way that in a client's words, like, I can explain it from my perspective, but it's almost like it's too ambiguous to them. They don't understand the operating model. They then have concerns about the amount of time. They equate time to value.
Yes.
Who's doing this well?
Well, so I've met a couple in my previous study, a few informants. It's confidential, so I can't reveal names, but I will say that they have found that there's this real hole in the market of people that have talent and that connecting that talent to the marketplace. And so part of that means having to create the noise and the need. And so part of it might be that a business posts a role for, say, a CFO. They want to bring in a chief financial officer. They're ready. They're in a growth stage, and they're like, oh, we need a CFO. That's the next step of our growth plan. But then when you really dive into it, no, you don't need to put that kind of investment, a CFO level. Maybe just put a fraction of the investment and just get what you need out of it. So part of it is just literally explaining that this model, you don't have to have that full commitment, and you probably don't even know what you need. And so really just trying to dial in and understand what the businesses need and kind of informing them that it might not be a full FTE. And that's where this comes in, where you can save overhead costs, but also still get in that expertise.
Yeah. It's like the trade-off that, like, at least sometimes I explain it as like, look, I'll give you a real life example, actually.
Please.
I had a client who he's like, I hope he listens. I love him, by the way. He's super smart, younger guy, like on the rise in that second stage of his career.
You know who you are.
You know who you are. And he had I had brought on his buddy, okay, to serve him in one role. He moves roles. He calls me now with like a big role with a big problem. And I've got someone who is senior, really, really excels at this particular thing that he needed. So I staffed her with him. He finds out, she's fractional. And I was like, I probably should have been a little bit more transparent about how fractional she was. But from my perspective, it's like, look, you don't need all the time. You need the expertise. And really, like, she can't move any faster than this anyway because of the organization. And he was highly skeptical. Highly skeptical, but somehow decided to say okay and trust us on it. And they have had an amazing experience together. And I think it's proved the value that like what she brought and her capabilities and experience was not linked to time, but it took his trust in me to like, just let's see if it works to get him over that. So
yes. And that's part of the journey of the fractional, the lived life experience of fractionals, is that their goal is that maybe this functional area hasn't existed before. There's not been a dedicated person to do it. And where the organization might think, oh, we need a full-time person. No, let's just kind of do, smaller steps of the fractional role. And so once the business then gets to a certain point because of the fractional's impact on the business, then all of a sudden they have the growth to have that position become an FTE. And at that point, the fractional is then backfilling their role for the C-suite role. Yeah. Why? Because they don't want to be a W-2. They're like, my work is done when I can hire someone to fill my role. And they still usually stay on from an advising standpoint with their clients.
We've seen both. We've seen people that stay on as advisors, and then I've seen people who move in directly into that role. This is, I know some of your research highlights people that get interested in this are going through career transitions.
Yes.
And so in this case, she was definitely a career transition person. And this is a CFO role, fractional CFO. She ended up being the FTE, and now she is the client, which is a fun thing. True, but it was a good entry point for her to enter and take her core functional skills into a new industry and prove it.
Yeah, and that's you touched upon one of my 5 fractional types, if you will, which I call the career stopovers. So in meeting with a lot of fractional people and having these formal interviews, I've come across and also inspired from one of my informants that there's certain personas, types, archetypes, if you will. architect. And one of them is the career stopovers. And these are people who are in transition and they need an income. They need to feed their families. They need to pay their bills. And so they look at fractional work as a stopover to hopefully lead to full-time employment. Or maybe by having several fractional roles, I can now make equivalent salary that I made without having the W-2. And so a lot of cases, they are keeping one eye open for a role while doing fractional work. And in some case, hoping that their existing fractional work will turn into the case that you just explained, like a full-time CFO role. Yeah. And so it's definitely one of the types I see. There are some risks and rewards and advantages and disadvantages with that. From a hiring standpoint, is that, how do you know someone's really in this for, the long haul? And so that's where I have other types of personas that kind of better speak to the long haul of this.
What are the other personas that you see?
Sure. So in random order, there are the first group, which is the Moonlight Mavericks, as I call them.
You are a marketer.
I love alliteration. So these are people who take on fractional work part-time. So they have a full-time role. They're kind of dabbling. Maybe they have someone in their network that's like, hey, love for you to do some work on blah, 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 like a few hours of your time, your month. And so they're like, okay. So they're doing their full-time job. They have the capacity to do more work. And maybe they're thinking, if I had enough of these part-time fractional roles, could I leave my full-time job, or do I just want to continue the side hustle? Either way, they're kind of side hustling. They're W-2, and they technically don't need the fractional work. The next group are what I call the fractional fledglings. And these are freelancers, and anyone can be a freelancer, but not anyone could be a fractional or fractional leader. And so these freelancers, they are very junior in their career, but they've heard the lexicon of fractional. And so they're adapting this word fractional. They're calling themselves fractional, but technically they're very junior in their career. And so one way to kind of weed out for businesses to weed out these fledglings is just to really look at their experience and their expertise. Just because someone identifies as a fractional leader, if they have less than 15, 20 years, they probably aren't. And so it's interesting that these junior folks have kind of tag teamed with the fractional title to try to monetize it, but technically they're not quite fractional leaders.
I have one exception to this rule that I think would not pass your paper test.
Okay.
Which is if somebody is coming out of a top consulting firm, I think, now I don't think they could be marketers because they don't have marketing experience. But I think for a small company or a mid-sized company, they definitely could come in and be a great COO, like a fractional COO. And here's why I think that. It's the 10,000 hour rule. Like you get 10,000, I've done the math on this. You get 10,000 hours of experience in like 2 years and 9 months. If you and I'm talking
24/7.
Right? Like post MBA, if you go to McKinsey, Bain, BCG, like you just do, you easily could come out. And some people are analysts, not them. The other ones, they could come out and do this. And I've seen great success. There's a guy, Sam Holland, we have interviewed, and on paper you would be like junior in your career. No, this guy's like a killer fractional COO. So. And I think it helps him because he's like still energetic about it, and like he is personally invested in ways that, like, if you're 50 and you're like tomorrow,
like an old soul. But that would be the exception.
Yeah, it's an edge case.
Yeah, where they might not have the years that fractionals have on average, but they have amazing experience and expertise.
Yeah.
So for that, I would let that one slide.
All right, so we've got our moonlighters, we got our fledglings,
our career stopovers, which I mentioned earlier. And then we have these, I call them the trailblazing titans. So these are the OG fractionals. They were doing fractional work before it became a term, before we knew what it meant, way before COVID. They would say that they've been doing fractional work for 10, 20 years, depending on who the individual is. And so, or they're more recent fractionals, but in either event, they've stuck a flag in the ground and they're like, I am doing this in perpetuity. Like, I'm here for the long haul. I love being my own business owner, having my own client roster, like owning my schedule, having all that agency and all the other points that I mentioned earlier. And not only are they putting a flag in the ground, but they're also building a sustainable career. And so in building a sustainable career, they've found happiness, health, and productivity over time. And so they are completely in it for the long haul.
Okay, I'll give you
Like
some
you,
research.
like you.
I was going to say, so I really fall in this bucket. There's a couple of people, both women and men on my team, that clearly fall in this bucket. I'm going to give you a little tidbit for your next round of research. I think there's another trait in this group, which is we get bored easily. And
yes,
we are the people who have to be doing 5 things at once, and we have to be constantly able to choose the next and move on to the next thing. All of us. I think 4 people. We all have side business. Even I have a side business, by the way. I have a consulting gig, my actual consulting business, and a side gig too. So, and these...
and that you bring up such a great point, and I've discussed this a lot with my professor, my advisor for my dissertation, and my co-author on my previous study, that I would love, if I have the capacity within this year, to do a quantitative study, because there are certain personality traits that I'm finding in people that do fall into this category. I've heard the term, I have ADHD, or I act like I have ADHD. I've heard that so many times that I'm like, wow, like I feel like the people that are really owning this and they have certain traits that people who are just a stopover don't have. No, and so you're bringing up a lot of great points, and that's actually something I'm hopefully going to be looking into later this year.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I wouldn't say I have AD, like I have no clinic, no, not at all, but I have this really weird need to do multiple things. I also have, and this is true of the other 3, we all have this crazy ability to go deep and focus. Like I could sit in a room and do something for 7 hours uninterrupted, no drugs, no issue. And that is my happy place. But then I want to put it on the shelf and I want to find the next thing and I want to go deep in that. And what that allows me to do is manage multiple clients at once. Because for their perspective, they never see me fluttering because I'm not, right? It's like, I'm with you, I'm deep. And then you're on the shelf and I'm going to the next thing. And I have the ability to switch really cleanly between them. Personality traits. It's our weirdness.
No, that definitely comes up a lot too. The fact that people want variety. They want to, when you're working under one company as a W-2, that's the one brand, that's the one product, that's the one company you're living and breathing 40 plus hours a week, weekends, etc. However, in the fractional space, you could have multiple industries, variety. I met one fractional that worked in airlines and also worked in some luxury space for something that had nothing to do with airlines, and then also worked in media. And he's like, I never would have this opportunity to work across all these different disciplines at the same time. And the learnings I'm getting from one, I actually could apply across industry with another. So I definitely, that's
enterprise,
a trait for sure.
Cloud support and manufacturing.
Oh, there you go. Yes, exactly.
Love them both for different reasons.
Yeah. But if you were W-2, you wouldn't have that opportunity. It's like just one.
No, I wouldn't. It's like innovation and real stuff all at the same time. It's like, is it Tuesday or Friday? Like, it's great. Okay, so those are your 4. There's
one more.
There's one more I saw,
And I call it the paycheck pragmatists. And these are people, like, call them whatever you want. They're 1099s, they're independent contractors, they're freelancers, they're consultants, they're fractionals. It doesn't matter what you call them. They just want a paycheck. But at the end of the day, they could be categorized as fractional, but they're not so caught up on the nomenclature and the identity. Just give them money.
Is the difference between them and the others the identity, or is it that? Okay.
Yes, definitely. There is this identity at play, and the trailblazing titans are like fully waving a flag, fractional, versus the paycheck pragmatists are like, whatever, like, if the hot word today is fractional, fine, call me fractional. And so they just identify as just an independent contractor, if you will. and that what they're called, they're very indifferent.
Your kids are my kids' age, so like, what's the movie Inside Out 2? Ennui.
Yes, I
They're
saw it.
ennui.
Yes.
Whatever.
Yes.
Whatever you need.
Yes. Laissez-faire.
Yeah. Okay, I have a question for you. I don't know if your research touched on this or not.
Sure.
Are you seeing a kind of an even, what do you see the differences between men and women? Like, are there men and women in this space? Are they identifying differently? Is it predominantly one or another?
It's a really great question. I've also earmarked that for further study, but just looking at the networks that I've utilized to find informants for these studies. I'm a member of a couple of fractional communities, and I'm also a member of some female-facing communities. And I put the same message out across all these different networks. It got to the point where all my informants were male. And I then had to, yes. And I was just like,
so surprising.
I was shocked, because you would think that this type of flexible work-life balance would really resonate with females, especially females who may have children. And I was just kind of like, there's something up here. The fact that I keep interviewing males. And so to the point where I had to do specific call out soliciting, hey ladies out there, I'm trying to do this balanced study. Only ones that's raising their hands are men. Can you please help make my study more balanced? And so that's something I really want to look into. And I've spoken to someone who founded a fractional job company. And as part of that, he was really surprised. He's like, whoa. He's like, you would just think that it's female skewing, but that's not, at least from a volunteer standpoint, a participation standpoint, that was not what I was seeing.
That's so, okay. Because I would have thought, and maybe this is just because like we're women and
yes,
our network is like, our closer network is just women. And so like, I think for every man that contacts, I get a lot of inbound about people that are interested in this kind of work. So like whatever, for every one man, there's 4 women, I would say, is like kind of who wants to talk to me. But maybe that's just because I'm a woman, I guess. So this year too, I joined. I mean, you just signed up for Fractionals United, which is like a big group. If anybody here is not a part of it, like I think
I'm in that.
Enter into the space, like has amazing resources. But it has 10,000 people in its Slack community.
13,000 now.
It's crazy. And I had no idea. And it's predominantly male. And I had no idea.
Well,
until then I was like, wait, there's men doing this?
Yeah, so even I went to a New York City event, and it was founded by a New Yorker who I've spoken with, and she's amazing. And at the event, it was mostly males. So it's I don't know. I don't know if just where the ladies are, and if maybe they're busy doing family things that they don't have the bandwidth to get more involved. But I just find it really interesting that it's just men that I end up speaking to.
Okay. So this may, I mean, from a big numbers perspective, it makes sense, right? Like one, if the early fractional roles were really like CFO, COO. Okay. CMO, I know, but those two. Then this is the issue of like when I moved back to Texas to go to business school. So I went to college in DC, and I lived in DC till I was like, I don't know, 4 more years or something. And men, women, no one was married. And I came to the University of Texas, and there were 9 single women in my class, and my class was 20% women. And I was like, where are all the ladies?
Yes.
And so now play that forward 20 years. There just weren't many of us to begin with. And then those people kind of peeled off. The numbers have dwindled. And then you're looking at this small pool from which to draw, people who are interested in this work. So
no, that's definitely a good point. One of my informants is a CFO in California, and was there during all the craziness of Silicon Valley, and very involved in helping companies solidify funding and raising rounds, and even taking a company public. Like, this person has an amazing profile, but one of her big things that she always stuck onto is like, why am I the only female doing this? I mean, it's a whole other discussion, but she just really, to your point, illustrates that if women aren't there from the beginning, that we're not, maybe that's why in the end result, male dominated.
Macro, but on a micro level, you're just looking at, I'm personally just looking at my network, and so I get a skewed view. Interesting. Okay, so another myth busted.
Yes.
Interesting. Okay. How big do you think the trend is? Just like, for as long as we're talking about numbers, like, how many people are doing this right now?
So I've been following a bunch of different places. There's not, if you look at the U.S. Labor Bureau statistics, there's not something that you can find. All 1099s, freelancers are all grouped together. You can't really break down who's identifying as a consultant or a freelancer or a fractional for that matter. But there's a couple different places where I've been able to get some data. One is within Google Trends. Within Google Trends, we can see what keyword searches are. And over the last 5 years, the search terms, fractional leadership, fractional executiveship have really grown up and blown up in the last 2 years. There's data from pre-pandemic, but definitely middle of 2023, which is right when I actually got introduced to it. That's when it was starting to really become its own. Then there are data points from LinkedIn. So I follow LinkedIn every now and then. I'll do a little search and try to figure out, how many people are fractional. When I did this last week, I came across 142,000 people that have fractional in their profile. When I did this yesterday, that number was 152,000. So it's growing globally. That's just week over week. And then if you actually look at people that have fractional in their title or in their headline, I was at 24,000. And that's a number I've also been monitoring. Last I looked, it was like 8,000, like a year ago.
Wow.
So year over year, the growth has been exponential. The Fraction United group that you mentioned, I think I was one of the first 1,000 members, and now it's 13,000 in 2 years.
I mean, and that was not long ago. They popped up out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, this is fascinating. Okay. Anything else that you think in your research that I didn't ask the smart question about that you think is important to the conversation?
I think you're pretty good. I would just add to my research that I just completed that it's really a journey that people are going on, and they fall into one of these fractional buckets maybe, but at the same point, they're a new business owner. They're a micro business. And so there's lots of learning curves. And I think kind of going through some of the pains in the beginning is what really weeds out the people like yourself, or people not like yourself, the people that have the personality to really stick within the long haul. And so if they're not finding success within their own network to be sustainable, to have career sustainability, maybe they're going to one of these agencies, because the agencies land clients on their behalf. And so a lot of that outward business development, they're not needed to do. So it's interesting that if one, for example, like COO, CFO, CIO, you're not maybe used to being client facing, but now all of a sudden you're your own business dev team. And that might not be a skill set that you have. And so that's where these agencies kind of come into play to help do some of that heavy lifting.
Yeah, that's not easy. And that's like, just truth be told, that is actually my biggest development area. It's one of those things where everyone said, go get a sales job at some point in your career, and I never did. And I kind of kick myself now. I'm like, gosh, that's a skill that sure needs sharpening. But I don't know, like, it's fine. I got my own way of doing it. But
well, no, even as a marketer, like, I can market anything, like product, service, you name it. Marketing myself, like that's a different skill, I think.
Yeah. The stuff that I try and one of the reasons why I started the 2x2, the newsletter, was because, and it was about 2 years ago, where people started asking me all these questions, and I was like, oh, I solved that. Oh, I solved that. Oh, I solved that. And I had just solved it on my own over years of work. And it took so much effort. And it turns out the answer was just so easy. And so I just started writing it as a creative outlet to share what I learned with other people. But those are the questions that people ask. It's like, and they're really common. It's like, how do you get business? How do I start my LLC? What software do I need to do my accounting? And there's one other one.
Billing. Like, how do you...
my rate?
Yes,
what's my rate?
Yes.
What's my rate? Those are the top three. And those people that can figure it out and can get. I find too that the kind of the threshold you need to hit, the escape velocity, if you will, is like 3 clients within a year. if someone finds 3 clients within a year, and I don't think it matters if they're concurrent or if they're different projects, but that is like, okay, I can find, they get the confidence and then they continue to do it. That's what I see. So, well, Toni,
test that hypothesis.
Yeah, Toni, well, thank you. I've been looking forward to this one for a long time. So thanks so much for coming in and sharing all this knowledge with us. You, I know, are embarking on a second, you're embarking on a second phase of your research. Is that right?
Yeah. So the study I just completed was actually related to a course that I took in qualitative research, but I am now in my dissertation phase. And in this crazy DBA world, I have 1 year to write a dissertation, do the research, and hand it over and be able to defend it. So that's a pro and a con of doing these like executive programs that aren't traditional PhDs. So as such, I'm really wanting to understand how this works. So I now understand one side of the equation, how the day-to-day life of a fractional is. What are some of the challenges? What is the pros, the highs, the lows? But what I'm trying to now understand is how does that work with the businesses that they work and support? How do those two work together? How is the fractional able to be successful and have impact? And so that's what I'm really trying to uncover with my current study, which will be kicking off hopefully in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah. Well, let me know, one, how we can support you. And if you need introductions to, clients or whatnot too, I'm happy to do that. And then, come back in a year and tell us what you learned. This is awesome.
Yes, I'm very excited. Thank you.
Well, thanks. That's it, guys.